Our next session looks at how COVID-19 will reshape the travel industry and why trusted identity will be crucial for reviving international travel. Andy Smith has been working in technology in the aviation industry for 20 years. In his role at SITA, the largest provider of aviation technologies, he works on industry-wide collaboration focused on customer experience. And today, Andy's going to be talking about the adoption of identification technologies to enable a seamless, touchless airport experience that's designed to increase the speed and efficiency of the airport experience. Welcome, Andy.
Hello, Greg. Great to be here, and thanks for the invite. Excellent. Thank you all. And yes, as Greg said, I wanted to just spend a few minutes sharing some of SITA's experience over what's been the most traumatic experience for us all and for the travel industry as well. And very much looking forward to the panel session at the end as well. I love getting questions. So what has SITA been doing in this space? As I mentioned, this last year has been incredibly stressful for everybody. It's decimated the industry. And we were approached very early on by some of our government customers to actually shut down borders. So the trust was no longer there. And obviously, this is a conference about trust as well. So we wanted to share some of those challenges and what we're doing to overcome, to get trust back into the travel industry, to get trust back for us all, for all stakeholders, so that we can all do what we love doing, visiting friends and family, experiencing tourism, conducting business, getting us back into the air. So what we created, as I say, very much bands and bubbles at the start, creating this environment where governments had to and rightly protect their citizens from the threat of COVID. But we also recognized that you cannot shut down borders forever. So we needed a way of opening up borders securely and safely. And in order to do that, we also recognized we needed to take advantage of what was already there. Now, as Greg mentioned, trust is vital at the moment, but trust has always been an element of travel. We've always needed to know who is coming into the airport, who is getting on a plane, do they have a right to travel? COVID has increased that requirement, of course, and I'll touch on that in a moment. But in order to get us back traveling, what SITA recognized is that we needed to reuse what the industry had already spent a lot of money, time, and effort, and intelligence and brainpower on, of getting those industry developments that were originally around facilitating what was expected to be a massive increase in passenger volumes, doubling of passenger volumes. So seamless traveler experience, touchless experience, some of which has been touched on before. We wanted to reuse that industry investment, maximize the challenge and maximize the use. Something Rachel touched on earlier. I love the phrase, strangely familiar. If we can get passengers using systems and processes that they've already got used to over the last few years, then adoption would be quicker. Hence, we needed to minimize that change, minimize the impact on airline and airport systems, minimize the impact on us as passengers, so that it was strangely familiar, so that we could adopt the processes and techniques in the new world as easily as we did in the old world before COVID. Interoperability is talked a lot, particularly by technology companies, but I'm not necessarily talking about technical interoperability here. Almost in many ways, we have to give that as a standard. W3C, the various rules and regulations that are out there already, we know will enable us to technically be interoperable with one another. But what we recognized is that the airline industry and community already carries out many, many checks on identity and validity. So we wanted that operational interoperability. Plug the requirements of COVID testing, of vaccination results and information as it comes along into the existing processes, so it's strangely familiar again. Now, if we can do that, if we can ensure that there is trust in all the processes and in all the touch points or contactless touch points, then we can bring confidence back. And in order to get traveling, in order to get airlines putting on flights, filling and selling seats, airports opening up effectively and efficiently, and governments to open their borders safely and securely, we need to give them the confidence. And that can only be done with the real-time health checks, with the ability to keep those who represent a higher risk away from the travel ecosystem. We don't want people traveling who represent an infection risk. We don't want them on the planes. We don't want in the airports, in the ports, on our cruise ships. So we need to maximize that touchless experience. We've already seen some examples of that in terms of touchless fingerprints, face biometrics are all needed to empower that touchless experience. And therefore, and somebody else mentioned this already, apologies, in fact, it was Blair mentioned, this collaboration between stakeholders, a trust network, so that you can rely on the information as it goes through. And then, of course, if things go wrong, support the track and trace. So what we created was this very simple use case, looking at effectively 4 solutions. I'll go through this fairly quickly, happy to answer questions on it later. But obviously, at the moment, we need testing. It's not something SITA is directly involved in. We do work in exceptions with test centres. But predominantly, there is a huge and existing trusted network of test providers out there. That needs to plug into these existing systems. Once we have that, we have level 2 or use case 2, which is effectively that declaration and attestation. So again, this already exists at the moment. And this is what SITA recognized, is we've been dealing with electronic travel authorization for security and immigration purposes for coming up for 25 years now, developing the world's first system with the Australian government. We look to repurpose that, to engineer it to be more applicable to health declarations and attestations, the ability to upload certificates and test those as well. So that's when we created Health ETA, which is at the heart of our Health Protect environment and ecosystem. So it enables passengers to upload their results into and then be verified and approved by government or authorities. Doesn't necessarily have to be international borders. It can be regional or domestic as well. But giving them that authority that you've checked and they can go. I mentioned about plugging into existing processes. For many, many years, 25 years, we've been operating something called advanced passenger processing, which is the ability to deny boarding based on a government's criteria. You might not fulfill visa applications, etc., or might not have the right immigration status to travel. So we've repurposed that as well, and this is what we're seeking to do now, is to give that ability to deny check-in to somebody based on not having a negative test result, of course. That would plug into the existing processes, giving airlines the trust that they can issue a boarding pass and the checks have been done. And therefore, travellers can go through the strangely familiar process that is already there, having those health checks carried out invisibly but securely. And then finally, we have something that SITA is present in about 1,000 airports around the world. And many of those have the ability for passenger checkpoints, passenger flow monitoring. And plugging the Health Protect ecosystem into that means you can carry on these checks. And again, if, according to ethics and regulations and the will of the passenger, they want to share biometrics as part of this process, then you can give a touchless experience through the process as well. All the while, not only checking the existing status, but checking health, immigration, security, all in one strangely familiar process. Now, of course, what I wanted to share, that is the process that we're looking at the moment. And we're seeing this from a survey that we do. So for many years, SITA's been conducting an air transport IT trend survey. The latest one was out yesterday, actually. It's available on sita.aero. Fascinating information. On the left-hand side there, we see a massive adoption or planned adoption from airlines, looking at self-boarding gates using identity documentation. It's going to double. That's the plan, is to double over the next 2 years. That can only be driven by trust. If you trust the identity, then you can deliver self-boarding gate solutions using biometrics and identity. And you can see at the bottom there the massive increase potentially in biometric only. That's only available if you can bind the identity with the biometrics in a trusted way. Airports themselves as well, on the right-hand side, the self-boarding gates there is looking to more than triple in the expansion using boarding gates and biometrics and travel documents. This is only achievable through trust. It's only achievable when we work together, when we collaborate, and when we interleave the new requirements of COVID, and health data is going to be a requirement for many years to come, is the anticipation. We need to interleave those interoperable with existing processes. I hope that's of interest, and I very much look forward to the panel discussions and answering any of your questions I can.